The source that I have is impeccable, and he said that not only were the cameras smashed, plural cameras smashed, so that the suspect likely knew about the locations of them, but that the car belonging to the sister of Savannah Guthrie, Annie Guthrie, was towed, impounded, and taken into evidence. And this is the wording. It's very important. The wording is very important. He said they now believe the son-in-law may be the prime suspect. Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point.
There is a car sitting in Tucson, Arizona, the blue Honda CRV. It belongs to Annie Guthrie and her husband Tommaso Cioni. And for weeks, through February, through March, through the slow and painful accumulation of days that this investigation has become, that car sat in a mechanic shop in Pima County while forensic specialists worked through every inch of it. While a family waited. While a community speculated. While the internet accused a man who had already been cleared. Day 72. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. And the story of that car, what was inside it, what it proves, and what it cannot prove, is the story that nobody has told completely. Until now. Welcome to the evidence room. I am glad you are here, and I need you to stay until the very end of this video, because the last section of what I am about to walk you through contains a question that nobody has asked publicly yet. A question about what that car was really protecting. And when you hear the answer, it will change everything you think you know about why that car mattered. Hit subscribe before we go any further. Turn on notifications. This case is moving, and when it breaks, this channel will be the first place the full picture comes clear. Let us get into it. Before we talk about the car, I need to take you back to the night that made it relevant, because you cannot understand what was found without understanding what happened first. And what happened first is a story that is both ordinary and devastating in equal measure. January 31st, 2026, a Sunday. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, sharp, independent, a woman who had lived in the Catalina foothills of Tucson for decades, took an Uber at 5:32 in the afternoon to her daughter Annie's home for dinner. This was not unusual. This was a routine. Family dinners, card games, the kind of Sunday evening that does not feel significant until everything that follows makes it the most important night in the record. Inside Annie's home that evening, there was a meal. There were games. The kind of ordinary family evening that does not cause anyone at the table to look at a clock and wonder about what is coming. At 9:48 p.m., that evening ended. Tommaso Cioni, Annie's husband, Nancy's son-in-law, walked Nancy to the blue Honda CRV parked in the driveway. He drove her home. The drive was approximately 10 to 12 minutes. At 9:50 p.m., the garage door at Nancy's Catalina Foothills home opened. Nancy walked inside. The garage door closed. Tommaso watched from the car until the garage closed completely. Then he backed out of the driveway, and he drove away. Those 2 minutes, 9:48 to 9:50 p.m., are the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie on her property. Neighbors' Ring cameras confirmed it. Garage door logs confirmed it. The timestamp is not in dispute, and what followed in the next 4 hours remains to this day the unanswered center of this entire case. Now, here is what most people understand about the 41-minute window, and here is what most people have gotten wrong about it. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, the doorbell camera at Nancy's front door went dark. When investigators say the camera was disabled at 1:47 a.m., they do not mean the battery ran out. They do not mean the Wi-Fi dropped. They mean someone approached that camera and deliberately ended its ability to record. Google's Nest cloud backup system captured a partial record of that moment. A masked figure, armed, carrying an Ozark Trail 25-liter backpack, approaching the property with the specific purpose of eliminating the camera's ability to document what came next. This is not impulsive. This is not a person who wandered onto the property and panicked. This is a person who knew the camera was there, who came with the knowledge of its exact location, and who understood that removing it was a necessary first step in what they came to do. At 2:12 a.m., the camera's back-end software detected motion on the property. Even though the camera itself had been disabled, the detection software logged a presence. At 2:28 a.m., the application connected to Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker showed a disconnect from her phone. 1:47 to 2:28. 41 minutes. That window, 41 minutes of deliberate darkness between the camera going offline and the pacemaker sync ending, is the center of this investigation. And sitting in a mechanic shop in Tucson, in pieces, for weeks, was the blue Honda CRV that investigators believed held the answer.
Now here's where I need to correct something, because the assumption most people made about that car is the assumption that drove 2 months of online speculation, unfair accusation, and investigative noise that almost entirely missed the real reason that car matters. When the Pima County Sheriff's Department impounded Annie and Tommaso's blue Honda CRV in the days after Nancy's disappearance, most people assumed the reason was obvious. Tommaso was the last person to see Nancy alive. He drove that car. He was in that car with Nancy for 12 minutes on the night she disappeared. Of course they took the car. That assumption is not wrong, but it is incomplete. And I'm going to start by telling you something that almost no coverage of this case has stated clearly. Tommaso Cioni was officially and unambiguously cleared as a suspect on February 16th, 2026. 16 days into the investigation, Sheriff Chris Nano stood in front of cameras and said the following: "The Guthrie family, to include all siblings and spouses, has been cleared as possible suspects in this case. The family has been nothing but cooperative and gracious and are victims in this case. Not partial clearance. Not, we are not focusing on the family at this time. Cleared. Unambiguous. Public. Day 16. And yet that blue Honda CRV, the car belonging to two people who had been officially cleared, remained in law enforcement custody for weeks after that clearance. The question nobody has asked directly is this: if the people who owned the car were cleared on day 16, why did the car stay so much longer? That question has exactly 3 possible answers, and only one of them makes sense when you look at the full record. The first answer is the mechanical one, and it is real. Investigative reporter Dave Mack, speaking on the Nancy Grace Crime Stories podcast, described what was happening with that Honda CRV at the mechanic shop. His words were precise. He said the car was being, quote, put back together. Let me explain what that phrase means in forensic terms. When investigators conduct a vehicle examination at this depth, they do not simply open the doors and look around. They disassemble it. Interior door panels removed, ceiling lining pulled down, trunk lining extracted, undercarriage inspected, every cavity examined, every surface swabbed. Reassembly, putting it back together, is the final stage of that process. It is what happens after the search is complete, not during it. Journalist Brian Enton separately reported that the forensic process caused a technical fault in the CRV's onboard electronics during data extraction. The car required additional repair work beyond the forensic examination itself. That is real. That is part of the picture. But here is the problem with stopping there. A mechanical repair has a completion point. An active investigation does not. The second answer is the one the internet assumed: that the car incriminates the driver, that the GPS record, the DNA, the electronic logs, all of it pointed at Tommaso. And I need to address this directly because tens of thousands of people have been operating on that assumption for 2 months.
Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer addressed the car search directly. She said law enforcement did not have any probable cause to believe the family was involved. They got consent. Not a warrant, not a court order, consent. They asked, and the family said yes. And then she said something that I think is the most important 7 words in the entire discussion of this case. If I have probable cause, I am not going to get consent. When you have probable cause, you go to a judge. You apply for a warrant. You compel. You do not knock on someone's door and ask politely. The fact that investigators sought consent for the CRV is a documented signal about the state of evidence against the people who owned it. They had reason to look. They did not have sufficient grounds to force. Which means the third answer, the one nobody has put on camera, is the one that actually explains everything. The car was not held to build a case against Tommaso Cioni. It was held to protect Tommaso Cioni for the investigation. Stay with me, because this is where the logic becomes important. Modern vehicles are not just machines, they are data devices. And the blue Honda CRV in this generation of Honda is one of the most data-dense evidence containers that law enforcement could have taken into custody in this case. Former Pima County Sheriff SWAT Commander Bob Krieger addressed this directly when asked why the car had not been returned. His exact words were, "The investigator's job is to create a case that is as rock solid as possible, one that leaves as little doubt as possible in a jury's mind at the end of the day. Maintaining chain of custody on important items is part of that." And he added specifically, "There is electronic evidence that can be collected via all of the sensors and computers on modern vehicles. Things from location to speed to time of day can all be cross-referenced based on the data recovered from the vehicle." Location, speed, time of day. Modern Honda CRVs carry an embedded event data recorder, the EDR. It operates continuously and independently of anything the driver activates. The driver cannot turn it off. It runs. The EDR logs GPS coordinates, where the car was, the exact route it traveled, every stop it made, how long it remained stationary at each location. If that vehicle stopped anywhere between 9:50 p.m. on January 31st and the following morning, that stop is in the record. The address, the duration, the timestamp. It logs ignition events. Every time the engine started, timestamp. Every time it shut off, timestamp. Door open, door closed. Seatbelt engagement. Every discrete event the vehicle registers carries a machine-generated timestamp that does not care about human recollection, does not degrade with stress, and cannot be altered without leaving evidence of the alteration. Honda models in this generation also log infotainment system interactions, connected phone pairings via Bluetooth, navigation inputs. If a phone was connected to that car's system and a destination was entered, there is a record of it. Now apply that forensic lens to the specific window that matters. Where was that car between 9:50 p.m., when it left Nancy's property, and 2:28 a.m. when the pacemaker sync ended? Was it in motion? Was it stationary at Annie and Tommaso's home approximately 10 minutes away? Did it move during the critical window? Did the ignition activate? Was a door opened? The vehicle's onboard record contains the answer to every one of those questions. And unlike a witness, it cannot be cross-examined. It cannot misremember. It either shows the car was somewhere, or it shows the car was not. That answer exists in the data, and someone inside this investigation has already read it. This is the question that nobody has framed directly in 2 months of coverage. Not whether the car incriminates Tommaso, but whether the car clears him, permanently, at the machine-generated level that a jury cannot dismiss. What if the GPS record shows the car never returned to Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood after 9:50 p.m.?
What if it shows the car was stationary at Annie and Tommaso's home within minutes of leaving, and the ignition did not activate again until morning? If that is what the data shows, and the family's public clearance on day 16 is fully consistent with that reading, then the CRV is not evidence against Tommaso Cioni. It is alibi evidence for him. Documented, time-stamped, machine-generated. The most resistant form of alibi the modern forensic record can produce. A witness can lie. A neighbor's recollection can shift under pressure. An alibi constructed from human testimony is always vulnerable on cross-examination. But a vehicle's GPS record, logged in real time, extracted by forensic professionals, and maintained in an unbroken chain of custody, that is a different category of evidence entirely. Think about what that means inside a courtroom. A defense attorney's entire job is to manufacture reasonable doubt. And the most natural target for reasonable doubt in this case is the last person in the record, the man who drove Nancy home at 9:50 p.m., the man whose name appears closest to the moment everything went wrong. If a defense attorney representing the actual kidnapper ever stands in front of a jury, the first thing they will do is point at Tommaso Cioni. What about him? He was the last one with her. What about that car? What about those 2 minutes in the garage? And the prosecution needs to close that line permanently before the trial begins. A vehicle GPS record that places the CRV 10 minutes away and stationary through the entire critical window does not just defend Tommaso Cioni. It removes him from the equation so completely that no attorney can put him back. A case built on a foundation that airtight does not leave space for reasonable doubt to grow. That is what the car was held for. Not to build a case against the son-in-law. To build a case that cannot be destroyed by pointing at the son-in-law at trial.
Now let me take you somewhere that most coverage has not gone. Because there is a darker layer underneath all of this that I think is important to examine honestly. 3 dates entered the investigative record before Nancy Guthrie ever disappeared. January 11th, January 24th, January 31st. January 11th entered the record because FBI forensic digital analysis indicated that someone may have appeared near Nancy's property on that specific date, nearly 3 weeks before the abduction. January 24th entered through on-the-ground reporting. Brian Ensign confirmed that FBI agents were specifically asking neighbors for surveillance footage from that date, 8 days before Nancy disappeared. And January 31st is the night the pattern ended and the investigation began. Think about what those 3 dates tell us together. If someone appeared near that property on January 11th and again on January 24th, before the crime, they were not stumbling through a neighborhood. They were returning to it. Returning suggests purpose. Returning to the same location across multiple weekends suggests study. And study in this context means one thing: preparation. This is not a person who acted impulsively. This is a person who invested time before they invested action. Someone who watched before they moved. Someone who chose specific nights, specifically nights when family was present, specifically nights when the last car in the driveway would belong to a man already in the record, to do their reconnaissance. Think about what someone watching that household across those 3 weekends would have learned. They would have learned that on certain evenings the house fills with family. Cars appear in the driveway. The lights stay on later than usual. And then, one by one, the cars leave. The last one carries Nancy home. The garage closes. The property goes dark. On January 11th. That car left. And they watched. On January 24th, that car left, and they watched. On January 31st, that car left at 9:50 p.m., the garage closed, and Nancy Guthrie was alone. and then they moved. Now I want to stay analytical for a moment and ask the question that I think is the most unsettling thing in this entire case. Not an assertion, an analysis. Is it possible that whoever committed this crime chose the night of January 31st, specifically the night when family was present, specifically the night when a son-in-law would drive Nancy home and be the last documented contact, because they understood how investigations work? Because they understood that the first person investigators scrutinize is always the last person in the record. A person who spent prior weekends watching that household would understand the pattern. They would know that on the nights when family came, there would be a last departure, a timestamp, a name attached to the last documented contact. And they would know that the early hours of an investigation would pull attention toward the last person in the record, while they moved in the opposite direction. If the answer to that question is yes, if this crime was structured specifically because Tommaso would be in the record, then the blue Honda CRV is not just evidence about a night, it is evidence about planning. It is evidence about the specific kind of mind that studies a household before it strikes one. A mind sophisticated enough to structure the crime so that initial investigative attention would be directed toward a cleared, innocent man, long enough for the actual perpetrator to disappear. That is not opportunistic crime. That is something else entirely. I want to walk you through what the forensic examination of that car was actually doing across all those weeks. Because most people hear vehicle search and picture a detective looking through the glove compartment. That is not what happened here. When investigators conduct a forensic vehicle examination at this depth, they are building multiple layers of an evidentiary record simultaneously. Not one thing, many things. The first layer is biological. Every surface of that Honda CRV was swabbed. Seats, seat belts, door handles, floor mats, trunk lining, interior panels. Every place where a human being who was inside that car might have left something biological. Hair, skin cells, saliva. And here is why that biological layer is particularly significant in this case. Earlier in the investigation, law enforcement confirmed that a DNA sample was recovered from dark gloves found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. That DNA was analyzed, and the result was one of the most chilling findings in this case. The DNA did not match anyone in CADIS. CADIS, the FBI's national DNA database, contains genetic profiles from millions of convicted offenders and arrestees across the United States. A DNA sample that does not match CADIS means one of two things. Either the person has never had their DNA entered into the system, never arrested, never convicted, possibly never questioned in a prior investigation, or they have been specifically careful for a very long time to avoid leaving biological material anywhere law enforcement might collect it. Both of those possibilities describe a very specific kind of person. Not an impulsive criminal. Someone who has operated at a level of deliberate forensic awareness for long enough that their profile does not exist anywhere in the national record. If the biological samples recovered from the Honda CRV are processed and they show only expected occupants, Nancy, Tommaso, Annie, then the biological layer confirms the clearance. But if those samples show biological material that does not match any expected occupant, material from an unknown third party, then that unknown profile may be the same CODIS non-match appearing in 2 separate pieces of physical evidence. And that is a connection you do not release publicly. That is a connection you protect. For the moment when a courtroom requires it. The second layer is transfer evidence. And this is the layer that almost never makes headlines, but that investigators sometimes treat as more significant than DNA. Every environment leaves a signature. Soil composition, plant pollen, mineral deposits, fiber types. The specific combination of materials present in a geographic location is often unique to that location.
When a vehicle travels somewhere distinctive, it brings material from that place back with it. On the tires, on the undercarriage, in the wheel wells. Forensic specialists can analyze that material and determine not just that the vehicle traveled somewhere outside its normal routes, but specifically where it traveled, down to a particular type of terrain, a particular desert wash, a particular stretch of dirt road in the Sonoran Desert surrounding Tucson. If the Honda CRV traveled somewhere outside its normal pattern on the night of January 31st, or on any of the 3 surveillance weekends that investigators flagged, the tires and undercarriage documented it. And if that location corresponds to anywhere significant in this investigation, the transfer evidence becomes a map. Not drawn by a person, drawn by physics. The third layer is vehicle telematics, and this is the layer that closes the loop. Beyond the EDR, modern Honda infotainment systems log connected phone identifiers, device MAC addresses, Bluetooth pairing signatures. If an unknown phone connected to that vehicle's Bluetooth system at any point in the relevant window, that phone's identifier is now part of the investigative record. A phone identifier can be traced, cross-referenced against carrier records, against cell tower pings, against the location data attached to every digital signal that phone generated during its time connected to the vehicle. The phone thinks it was just pairing with a car stereo. The FBI's Forensic Digital Unit sees it as a thread. And threads in cases like this are how investigations end. Let me step back and look at this from a different angle for a moment, because I think understanding the prosecution perspective helps you understand why every one of those layers matters. Federal kidnapping cases, particularly cases involving interstate elements, ransom demands, and victims who remain missing, are among the most complex prosecutions in the American legal system. The practical standard is not just proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The practical standard is a case so complete, so multi-layered, so evidentially rich, that a defense attorney cannot find a single thread to pull without the entire defense unraveling. Every piece of evidence from that car contributes to that standard. The GPS record closes the door on one suspect. The biological evidence opens the door on another. The transfer evidence places a vehicle in a location. The telematics identifies a phone. The phone traces to a person. And the person, whoever they are, wherever they are, is sitting at the intersection of all 4 of those evidentiary streams. You do not arrest a suspect in a case like this when you have one of those streams. You arrest when all 4 converge. When the case is not just strong enough to charge, but strong enough to convict. Strong enough that no defense attorney, no matter how skilled, can manufacture the doubt a jury would need to walk someone free. That is what Krieger meant when he said jury. He did not say jury because investigators are being bureaucratic. He said jury because the FBI and the federal prosecutors in the District of Arizona are building a case to win. And I want to mention something before we close that has been sitting in this investigation since February and has received almost no attention in the broader coverage. Nancy Guthrie has a pacemaker implanted in her chest. That device has been functioning since before February 1st, and it has been generating a low-power Bluetooth signal every single day since she disappeared. 15 to 30 feet of range. That is all. 15 to 30 feet. The FBI deployed signal detection equipment, what has been publicly described as signal sniffers, to search for that specific Bluetooth signature. Helicopters, ground teams, coordinated sweeps of geographic areas that the investigation's spatial analysis identified as priority zones. If Nancy is alive, if she is being held somewhere within any of the search corridors investigators have identified, the moment a detection team gets within 30 feet of her location, that signal appears. The search is happening. It has been happening since the first week of February. On day 72, it continues. And every piece of evidence from that blue Honda CRV, the GPS data, the biological layers, the transfer material, the digital telematics, has helped narrow where those sweeps focus. Every piece of evidence removes a possibility. Every possibility removed makes the remaining ones more likely. Day 72. No arrest, no named public suspect. But a blue Honda CRV whose forensic examination is complete, whose GPS record, biological samples, transfer material, and telematics data are all inside the investigation, under chain of custody, protected for the moment when a courtroom requires them. The car cleared the son-in-law, permanently, machine-generated, time-stamped, unimpeachable. What remains, after that alibi is established, after the cleared family is removed from every possible angle of defense argument, is a significantly cleaner investigative picture. The masked man is in that picture. The 3 surveillance weekends are in that picture. The 41 minutes are in that picture. The DNA that matches nobody in the national database is in that picture. And whoever is in that picture has no GPS record proving they were elsewhere. No machine-generated timestamp placing them 10 miles away while an 84-year-old woman was being taken from her home in the dark. Nancy Guthrie is present tense to her family. Her daughter Savannah said it simply when someone noted that she speaks of her mother as though she is still here. Savannah answered with 7 words that stopped the country. She said, "She is present tense to me." Day 72. The car is back. The evidence is protected. The investigation is moving. The evidence room will be here when the record breaks open. If you have any information about what happened in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, on the night of January 31st into February 1st, 2026, the FBI wants to hear from you. Tip line: 1-800-CALL-FBI. That is 1-800-2255-324. Online: tips.fbi.gov. The $1 million reward from the Guthrie family is active. If you were in the area on any of those nights, if you saw a vehicle, if something did not feel right at the time and has felt heavier since, call. Nancy Guthrie is present tense. She should be present tense to all of us. Drop the words "evidence room" in the comments if you made it all the way through. We read every single one, and we want to know who is building this case alongside us. Subscribe to the evidence room. Turn on notifications. Nancy deserves the answer, and we will not stop until we find it.